Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Check out their website, fullpresscoverage.com, for this podcast, a bunch of other great podcasts and articles. You can find us wherever podcasts are found. Just type in the whole name of the show, the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. It seems wordy, but it takes you all about 2 seconds to type out the whole thing. So, I don't want to hear any complaints from anybody. Sap, I know you like hearing complaints because your two favorite players in the world are Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James. I'm just going to continue to harp on that. I just find it hysterical that the two guys that you love the most in the world are the two guys who like to complain the most in the world. But, we don't have to keep talking about Aaron Rodgers. The past couple of shows, I feel like we've started very football-centric for a basketball show.
Well, Aaron is kind of dominating the sports world right now. I mean, ESPN's leading it with all of their shows. LeBron's dominating sports talk as well, and he normally does. It is basketball season in terms of the NFL. We're done with the draft. We're done with free agency. This is normally like a quiet time in the NFL. I know next week they'll release the schedule. I'm sure the NFL's like, what do we do with the Green Bay Packers? Because they're not quite the same team without Aaron Rodgers. Do we put them on multiple national telecasts and hope that he's there next year, or do maybe we know something that they're not telling us, that he's going to end up in Denver? I know the Denver Broncos right now are the 9th betting choice to win the Super Bowl. I don't think they're the 9th best team in the AFC without Aaron Rodgers, but maybe Vegas knows that Rodgers is going to Denver, and now their odds have been shortened because of the improved quarterback play that he would bring. So yeah, both of my guys like to be in the news. They're both passive-aggressive. They do like to complain. But you know what? For what we do, they are gold. I mean, we don't talk about Kawhi Leonard very much because he doesn't say anything. But we talk about LeBron, obviously, on this basketball podcast. And we work in Aaron Rodgers from time to time because he does like the attention. And by the way, Jet, he's a 1% older than Milwaukee Bucks. So,
it all ties in. That's the great part about it. It all ties together. 1% owner is enough for us to be able to justify talking, spending time on Aaron Rodgers. But you're right. For what we do, Sap, it is gold. And I think that's why, LeBron James isn't such a big athlete just because of his immense skill, but because he is an interesting person and he has interesting things to say, whether you agree or disagree. Interesting is the optimum word there, right? Is that he says things and does things that create conversation. You can like or dislike what you say or he does, but at the end of the day, the fact remains that he's constantly creating headlines, and that is exactly what you look for in an athlete. If you're doing a talk radio show, a podcast, you're a columnist, that's what you're hoping for. If everybody was Kawhi Leonard, we'd have no industry anymore.
No, we wouldn't. I mean, it would be the National Silent League or whatever. It'd be IBM, because he's almost like a cyborg himself. So, LeBron, even though he's played, 2 games in the last 2 months, is still at the forefront of what people are talking about in the NBA. He doesn't like the play-in tournament because the Lakers may be in the play-in tournament, depending on what happens down the stretch. But the play-in tournament's going to be, I think, very interesting this year because there are some interesting teams involved in that I don't know if any of the teams that make it 7 through 10 in either conference can make a run deep into the playoffs, but just qualifying for 7 and 8 in each conference could be fascinating, really interesting games that we might be seeing in a week and a half.
Right, which leads us to our first, real topic of conversation, Sap, and I know you didn't do that on purpose. You just sort of meandered into that. It wasn't at all a professional transition or anything like that. No, I can't give you any credit.
I'm a good team player,
Very good.
If I'm Aaron Rodgers, you're Devontae Adams. I see you open, I deliver the football.
Or if I run the wrong route, you passive aggressively throw it into the out of bounds area.
I take my equipment and throw it out the window. My brand new tripod. I look like Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window here, and my fake background behind me. I throw a hissy fit if you run the wrong route. It's all on you.
But so yeah, the play-in does create an interesting scenario for who a team that could potentially disrupt things are. I think that we've talked about this enough that we don't see, whoever gets in the 7 and the 8 seed in either conference really putting a scare into, the teams at the top, especially in the Eastern Conference. Those 3 teams in the top of the Eastern Conference, we don't think are going to have any scares in the first round. But when you're talking about a team like the Lakers, who are in certain danger of being in that play-in spot. Right now, they're the 6th seed, so they're just one game out of being in that play-in spot with the Blazers. I don't know the tiebreaker right now, Sap. Off the top of your head, do you know who has the tiebreaker between Portland and
They still
LA?
have to play each other another game, so that's going to be a big one
And they've
later in the
split?
week. Believe they've split the first 2 games, so now that will decide who gets the tiebreaker for the 7th spot. Dallas holds the tiebreaker over the Lakers right now because they took 2 games from them a couple weeks ago. The Lakers shouldn't be in this position, but you know what? When you lose 20 games from LeBron James because of injury, and you lose closer to 30 games because of the injuries to Anthony Davis, this is the situation you're in. Look, if they're in that 7 through 10, then obviously they're the most dangerous team because they're the defending champs. If LeBron's healthy, AD's healthy, no one wants to play them. And I still think the top 2 seeds in the Western Conference, Phoenix and Utah, they both had marvelous years, but I don't think anybody expects them to get to the finals, let alone win the championship. Where in the Eastern Conference, we expect Milwaukee, Brooklyn, or Philadelphia to be the representative of the Eastern Conference in the finals. I think anybody else would be a surprise.
Yeah, certainly that way. It seems how it would shake out to me. I mean, it wouldn't just be a surprise; it would absolutely shock me. So right now, if we're looking at the teams that would be involved in the play-in tournament, Sap, in the Eastern Conference, as it currently stands, today, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, or as I like to call it, the day after Star Wars Day.
True.
The Celtics, Hornets, Pacers, and Wizards are 7 through 10, respectively, in the East. So that would be the field for the play-in the Eastern Conference. And in the Western Conference, it would be Portland, Golden State, Memphis, and San Antonio for the play-in spots there. Now, in the East, it seems like none of those, no one else can really enter the conversation. It seems like Washington has played themselves into at least being in this play-in position because the next closest team to them is Toronto, and they have a 2.5 game lead on Toronto, or 3.5 game lead. My mistake, 3.5 games. So Washington's going to be in it. Those in Charlotte, Indiana, and then it remains to be seen if it's going to be Boston or Miami or Atlanta sitting in that 7th spot. In the West, it's a little bit more interesting, Sap, because like you said, you're talking about the Lakers and the Mavericks and the tiebreaker there. So you have those 2 teams right now that have the same record, 37-28. Portland's right behind them at 36-29. And then the teams below that, Golden State, Memphis, San Antonio, are all pretty close together. But New Orleans is threatening a little bit right now, just 2 games back of the Spurs, so they could be potentially in the conversation as well. It depends on what you think of the Spurs, if they can hold off for the last week and a half, 2 weeks here. But let's look at these teams let's take the teams that we have that are in, that we know are in right now, Sap. Let's just pretend nobody else is going to crash the party. Let's say, Golden State, because they have obviously a guy who is one of the best players in the league, and Steph Curry. Are they the scariest team, or is it maybe Washington, because they've been playing so well recently? Of the lower teams, I'm not talking about the 7th seed. I'm talking about the teams, that are at the bottom right now.
I think they're the 2 most intriguing teams. Washington, because they're playing so well, 8-2 over their last 10, and Russell Westbrook is a virtual tornado at this point. The other night he had 21 rebounds, 24 assists.
Tornado.
He's a triple-double tornado. 4 more triple-doubles. He's going to surpass Oscar Robertson for the most triple-doubles in league history. I'm not a huge triple-double guy. I mean, if someone puts up 40 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists, that's better than 14 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. That's a much better game than the other one, but it's not a triple-double. It's like hitting for the cycle in baseball. Give me the guy who hits 3 home runs in a single over a guy who hits for the cycle. But Westbrook has been playing amazing. No, I sound very pointed at this point. Don't call me grumpy. I won't throw you the football anymore. Even if you get open, I'm going to someone else. But I think Washington's intriguing because not only do they have Russell Westbrook, they also have Bradley Beal. So they're playing at a pretty high level. We thought they were going to be good this year. I remember early in the season, we're like, watch out for Washington. They're going to be a fun team to watch.
I like their roster.
Intriguing. It is, but it's taken time because Westbrook's not the easiest guy to play with. We can agree on that. So now I think his teammates are trying to figure out how to play with him. Bradley Beal's having an outstanding season. And I think that they, if they can get in, which I believe they're going to make it at least as the 10 seed, maybe as the 9 seed, and then they have to win at that point 2 games to get to 8. That's what makes it
Right.
difficult, because they'll have to win the 9-10 matchup, and then they play the loser of 7-8. Whereas Golden State right now looks pretty entrenched there at number 8, so they may only have to win 1 game to get into the real playoffs. So, but Washington intrigued me because they have 2 players they can rely on. If you need to win 2 games, Westbrook can win one on his own, and so can Bradley Beal. With Golden State, you'd expect Steph to be the guy that has to win the play-in game. If he has to win 2 games to get into the playoffs, that's a lot to ask for him. And by the way, you mentioned San Antonio only being 2 games ahead of New Orleans. The league is hoping and praying that it's New Orleans, not San Antonio. They want to see Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball in the postseason compared to the San Antonio Spurs, who, when they were winning 50 games a year and winning championships, were never must-see TV because they were such a well-coached team. You kind of compare them to like grilled chicken over salad. It's really good for you, but it's not real tasty or exciting. Obviously, the league would rather see New Orleans than San Antonio. But I think Washington, the way they're playing, and Westbrook looks like he's on a mission. I'm kind of rooting for him to get into the tournament, into the playoffs. And then how about a Washington-Brooklyn first-round series? I mean, he would be, out to absolutely destroy the entire Brooklyn Nets team led by Kevin Durant. So that would be intriguing. I think Washington right now, because of Westbrook and just the effort that he's playing with and the production he's putting forth, could be a sneaky tough team in the Eastern Conference. Although, again, I don't see any of those 3 teams in the East losing to one of the 7 through 10 teams. I could see that happening in the West. I mean, maybe Steph gets really hot and carries Golden State into a first-round series against Phoenix, and maybe he upsets them. I mean, we know Golden State's been a tough team for Chris Paul to get by over the years. Now, again, this isn't the normal Golden State team because you don't have Klay Thompson. You don't have, obviously, Kevin Durant. And I think Draymond's not the player he used to be. But, Steph Curry is obviously a guy that scares the shit out of you because he's capable of going 40 points on really efficient shooting. But look out for Washington. I think that's a team to look out for.
Yeah, Golden State, they obviously have, if you're talking about Washington and the Warriors, they have the best player of that bunch. I don't think you can really make an argument there. Right. As much as I like Beal and Russell Westbrook, I mean, Steph Curry is the best player of that bunch, and pretty definitively.
Scotty Brooks would not agree with you, and I know we're going to talk about that in a few moments, but Scotty Brooks thinks that, Westbrook is, like one of the 10 greatest players in the history of the sport, which I find kind of laughable, but continue.
Well, I'm starting to like Scott Brooks a lot more than I used to. Good. Maybe he should be the new coach of the Celtics. But the problem is, the difference is, despite Curry being the best player of that bunch, the Warriors roster is just very flawed, and I think it's more flawed than the Wizards, which is weird to say because, the Wizards have been pretty much terrible for the whole season. Golden State has been treading water, but the Wizards obviously have suddenly just surged and catapulted to 30-35 record, which isn't anything great, but compared to what it was, I mean, it's kind of amazing they're at this point right now. I just look at Golden State, like you said, Curry has to do so much heavy lifting. Like, I mean, really has to go bananas. He's capable of doing it, but in these shorter 1 or 2 game spans for the play-in thing, if you're getting into a 7-game series, you can't ask him to do it 4 times in a 7-game series where he wins a game by himself.
No, generally we've seen a handful of players in the history of basketball that have been able to do that, to win series all by themselves, namely Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Those are the 2 that come to mind. Now, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson never had to do that because they always had great teammates with them, whereas Jordan, especially early in his career, LeBron in his last few years with Cleveland, when Kyrie had already been traded, and early in his career in Cleveland, it was just incredible. But even his second iteration in Cleveland, by the time Kyrie Irving had checked out and ended up with the Celtics, he was carrying a lot of trash to the NBA Finals. Those are the 2 guys because they could just do everything. I mean, Steph Curry's not going to shut anybody down defensively. He's not going to go grab 12, 14 rebounds. He's not going to do all of that. He can get 40 pretty easily and efficiently.
Yeah, it's not just scoring, like you said, Sap. You can't just say go out and get 40 in the regular season. In a one-off game, that works. But over a course of a series, you got to be able to do a lot of things if you're going to single-handedly carry your team to winning a playoff series. And he's just, because of his size, because of the limitations he has defensively, he's not capable of doing all those things. I think he makes players better. I think he is one of the best offensive players in the league, but he's not going to be able to shut anybody down. And if you're going to pull off an upset, you need to be able to do all those things. LeBron took over the series offensively and defensively. Jordan took over the series offensively and defensively. And even though their rosters may have been flawed, they stepped up their game to that extra level that they needed to, that they were capable of, to be able to accomplish something that really very few, if any, other players are able to do. Like, that LeBron team that he went to the finals with when they beat the Celtics in Game 7 in Boston. Jeff Green was their second best player. Like, that team sucked. That was just a horrible roster. I don't know how the hell they got them there. I mean, it's not like he beat a great Celtics team, but
but Kevin Love didn't even play the last 2 games. He was concussed, and it was LeBron with Jeff Green was their second best player. Tristan Thompson was probably their third best player. As great as Kobe was, and may he rest in peace, the great Kobe Bryant. When Shaq left after the 04 season and until Gasol got there in 07, 08, in between that, he could never quite elevate a team to the finals, right?
Whereas no, they were the 8th seed a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why when people like to say, well, Kobe's right there with Jordan and they're both better than LeBron, I'm like, no, the debate of who's the greatest player ever outside of the centers is LeBron and Michael Jordan. Kobe's, phenomenal, one of my top 10 players of all time, but he couldn't quite carry a team the way LeBron and Jordan have been able to do that through their illustrious careers.
So, yeah, I think I agree with you what you're saying about the Wizards having 2 guys that you can really rely on. Right. I think that's something, Golden State, you'd like to think, okay, maybe Andrew Wiggins can step up. You like Wiggins a little bit more than I do. He's not at the level of a Russell Westbrook or a Bradley Beal. Draymond Green has games where he looked phenomenal, but you could say, okay, Draymond, you shut somebody down and he can do it, but then he'll score 3 points in that game. Right. So you can't do both. It's not a great roster, and they don't have Wiseman. They're tremendous rookie. Obviously, they don't have Klay Thompson. I'm glad you mentioned that we were both high on Washington at the beginning of the season. It seems like forever ago, because I looked at the roster and said, this is a pretty good team. They have a good backup point guard. I like Ish Smith. I like Robin Lopez. I like Rio Hachimura. Yep. I like the rookie that they drafted from Israel, Denny Avila. I was like, okay, this team could be maybe like a 5 or a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. Yep. And then they started off the season like they were like 2-16. Like it was
terrible. Yeah.
And so I think everybody was like, what is going on with this team?
Right now, they're playing like a 5 or 6 seed, right? Because we've got those 3 teams in the East that are noticeably better than everybody else. Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Milwaukee. I mean, the Knicks are the 4 seed. And it's a fantastic story, but, no one's taking them seriously outside of maybe winning the first round. Does anybody think that the Knicks could beat Brooklyn, Philadelphia, or Milwaukee? I don't. I know Tom Thibodeau is a great coach. May win Coach of the Year. Julius Randle probably going to win Most Improved Player, get some MVP votes, but they're not at the level of those other 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. Washington can go toe-to-toe with anybody, and a lot of it has to do with Russell Westbrook, whose sheer will to win seems to be rubbing off on the rest of his teammates, and that's an important thing.
On Russell Westbrook.
Oh, no, as far as a guy who's given max effort, absolutely. You can't help but like the guy. I mean, he just goes out there and busts his ass every minute of every game. I mean, that's Allen Iverson's favorite player is Russell Westbrook. And there's some parallels there. I mean, guys who I don't know if they really fit into the teamwork that you look for to try to win a championship. They're both kind of spectacles, wildly popular, especially with young kids.
I like that word, spectacle.
Well, it's like you go see Allen Iverson, he's going to put up 41, but the team might lose by 15 because he took 30 shots. And, he didn't always fit in with his teammates. And Westbrook's kind of the same thing.
Don't miss games either, to their credit.
No.
For guys who take a lot of bumps.
Oh, no. They're tough. I don't think Westbrook played football. I know that Iverson was really good in football in high school, but I'm assuming that the football coach, whatever high school Westbrook was at, was trying to get him to play football. He kind of brings that mentality, and that's great. No, I admire Russell Westbrook. I do. He's not my type of player because he's not a force multiplier. I think his numbers translate to more about him than the team. I think his numbers get a bit overinflated. I think he's the polar opposite of Chris Paul, where sometimes you look at Chris Paul's numbers even this year and you go 16, 8, 2 steals. How's he in the MVP running? Well, because he's just made that team that much better. I think that Chris Paul's a force multiplier. I think Westbrook at times could be a force divider. But no, I want to see him in the postseason because I would love to see Washington against Brooklyn in the first round. That would be phenomenal. I mean, he's not going to back down from anyone.
Yeah, I think that when we first started doing shows together, Sap, back at the Herald, maybe you were not as big of a Westbrook fan as you are now. I think he's grown on you.
I wouldn't go that far. When I watch him play, it kind of feels like the hamster on the cycle that just keeps running and running and running, and a lot of times not much gets done. I think there's a lot of wasted motion in his game. Again, he's not a very efficient player. He's a 30% three-point shooter in his career. That's like, at that point, you should say, Russell, stop taking threes because you can't hit him. No, but I mean, I don't think he's an easy guy to play with. Let me put it that way. He seems to be demanding with his own teammates, although his teammates seem to love him. They support him. But no, I admire the guy as a player. Are you kidding me? You'd be a fool not to. It's not my type of player. I'm more of the Chris Paul, point guard, Isaiah Thomas from the Pistons and those great point guards who just seem to be in total control of the situation. Westbrook, it feels, again, like a tornado. Like it's just a lot of stuff going on. And, at the end of the game, they fall a little bit short and he just keeps jacking up shots. I mean, in 2016, they're up 3-1 against Golden State. And in games 5, 6, and 7, he took as many shots as Durant. I'm sorry. If you're on the court with Kevin Durant, he should be your primary scorer, not Russell Westbrook. And I think he gets so blinded by his competitiveness, and that's a great thing, right? But sometimes it gives him tunnel vision and it just doesn't work for him. But no, I admire the player.
I have seen a couple instances where last shot or last play, he just has complete tunnel vision, like you said, and turns the ball over, or doesn't make the right play. So yeah, I think there's some of that with them. Somebody who likes him a little bit more than you do, Sap, is his own coach, Scott Brooks, who also coached Russell Westbrook when he was a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder. So he's very familiar with Mr. Westbrook. He had this to say. I used to say he's going to probably go down as the third best point guard ever, but I think he's past one, and he's going to go down probably as the second best. Number one, obviously, is Magic Johnson. What he does, there's no point guard that's ever done it. Nobody. I've been fortunate enough to see Russell Westbrook for 8 years do a lot of things that are pretty much superhuman at times. Point guards don't do what he does. They aren't built that way. There might be some that shoot better. There might be some that can probably do certain things better, but there's nobody in the history of the game that can do what he does throughout the stat sheet. That guy is as high as a level of a player as this league has ever seen. So Scott Brooks has Russell Westbrook firmly at number 2, right behind Magic Johnson, who I believe is your number 1 point guard of all time.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, Magic Johnson is the greatest point guard of all time. That's why when Dr. J gave out his all-time team and he had Oscar Robertson and Jerry West as his first team backcourt and Jordan and Magic as his second team backcourt. At that point, I couldn't take the list seriously because I don't know of anybody who's watched basketball over the years who doesn't think that Magic and Jordan is the best backcourt in the history of the sport. I don't even know if it's close. Kobe Bryant is the second best shooting guard, and I think there's a pretty sizable gap between MJ and Kobe. Magic certainly the greatest point guard ever. I think Oscar Robertson is the second greatest point guard ever. But I do like the fact that Scott Brooks has lists, kind of like I do. So that's pretty cool.
Love lists.
I love lists, and he's fluid with it, which I am as well. First of all, you have to define point guard, right? Like I think the way the game is now, it's almost positionless. So especially in the backcourt, is Russell Westbrook even really a point guard? He's a guard or a lead guard. I mean,
he's the primary ball handler, I guess is what you would say, right?
He is, but he also scores too much for an old school point guard. Old school point guards don't get 11 rebounds a game, which is what he's averaging this year. I don't think he's a very good defensive player, which Chris Paul is. I would not put him number 2.
He's not Chris Paul. He's fine.
He's not Chris Paul. Chris Paul's an elite defender.
He's better
Isaiah
than Curry.
Thomas. Westbrook, I think he's a better athlete. Yeah, I'll give him that. But Curry always has a tendency of being at the right place at the right time. Curry gets 6 rebounds a game himself. It just seems like the ball comes to him, but he's in the right place at the right time. this is my list of point guards. Again, it's tough to define point guards and guards. Obviously, Magic 1, Oscar number 2. I have Jerry West number 3. Now, people will argue, is West a point guard, a shooting guard? He was a guard, but let's call him a point guard. Steph Curry number 4, Isaiah Thomas number 5, Chris Paul at number 6, Jason Kidd. I think Jason Kidd was better than Russell Westbrook. Gary Payton's right there with him, as is Allen Iverson. I would put Iverson and Westbrook, very comparable players in terms of maybe not everything about them, but the way they played with that energy and that ferociousness. There's other point guards in the history of the sport that I would put close to Russell Westbrook. Now I'm going to go on the way back machine here. Bob Cousy, John Stockton, who I'm not a huge fan of. I underrate Stockton by a lot of cases, and Karl Malone. Walt Frazier, and Steve Nash. I mean, he's a 2-time MVP. So he's put him 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever. I have him like 11th. You can argue that he's as good as Chris Paul, because we had that discussion a week ago. Do you think he's better than Jason Kidd?
Jason Kidd seemed to elevate his teams more than Westbrook. I mean, the stats are way better than Jason. He blows Jason Kidd's stats out of the water.
Oh yeah, it's a different
Jason
sport,
Kidd didn't score. He wasn't really a big scorer.
Westbrook's won a scoring title, won 2 scoring titles. I mean, he's a.
So that's hard to say. I love Jason Kidd, even though he tortured the early 2000s Celtics relentlessly, and I'm sure I booed a lot when I was going to games as a kid for Jason Kidd, but I love his game. And he's one of my favorite players.
Great player
ever.
Yep.
It's a good conversation, maybe a conversation for another day to really go Jason Kidd, Russell Westbrook, because when you think of triple doubles, especially post 2000, those are the 2 guys that probably come to mind the most, and LeBron.
It's easier to get triple doubles now because there are more possessions. More possessions means more rebounds, more assists, more scoring. The game's played at a different pace than it was, heck, even 10, 12 years ago.
I remember at the time wondering, hey, could Jason Kidd average a triple double like Oscar Robertson did? And talking about that, when I was a kid, and saying, no, nobody could average a triple double again. I mean, well, Russell Westbrook does it every season, makes it look pretty easy, which is, I mean, it is. I do think, and I saw him complaining about this the other day, and I do think he's a point that people are sort of, I know you're not big in the triple doubles, you're hitting for the cycle, and that's fine, but I mean, he does it so frequently that people aren't appreciating how awesome it is, how frequently he's doing it. I mean, he's averaging it. It's ridiculous, and he's not doing cheap ones, the 11 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists. He's scoring, we've talked about this before, he's scoring in the 30s. He'll get 20 some odd assists. He'll have a game where he has 20 rebounds. I mean, he's 6'3", 6'4" sap. He's getting 20 rebounds in a game. I mean, that doesn't even make sense.
The other night in the same game, he had 21 rebounds and 24 assists. He didn't have to score a point to be the best player on the court. Now, that was a 154 to 141 win over the Pacers, where between the 2 teams, 17 players scored in double figures. And, oh, by the way, another player scored 9. Like, I don't know what was going on in that game. It was an all-star game. So, again, more possessions, more missed shots, your opportunity to get more rebounds and assists. So it's a different sport. When Oscar Robertson was getting triple doubles, the game was played at a faster pace. It was comparable to now. That's why you saw Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell getting 25 rebounds a game. Now, they were dominant, but there were just more rebounds available.
Right.
Then after the 80s, things slowed down in the 90s and the early 2000s, where the scores were lower. Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals, the Celtics lost to the Lakers 83-79. I mean, right now, that's like a halftime score.
Yeah, that's actually, I think it was the halftime score of the Celtics and Blazers the other day. It was
pretty much, right?
It was ridiculous. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, listen, I love Westbrook. I like him more than you. I wouldn't say he's the second best point guard of all time. I'm not going to go that far. I like Westbrook more than Curry. I don't think he's better than Curry. I enjoy Westbrook's style and personality a little bit more than Curry's, but he's not better than him. I can't do that.
No.
Chris Paul, I think it's a fair debate. We did it the other week. Oscar Robertson, Westbrook now at this point, to pass some of these guys, definitively needs to win a title. He's not going to do it on this team. He might not ever do it. He really, because of his style of play. I mean, would Oscar have won a title if he never played with Kareem?
No,
Probably not.
the issue that people have with Oscar Robertson, he was one of the smartest players in the history of the sport, but he, like Chris Paul, was not the easiest guy to play with because he was playing at a different level than everyone else. I know I've talked to Bob Ryan many times, and he always felt that Oscar Robertson didn't really have a heart. Like, he was clinically and technically extreme, like that type of player, but he didn't have that vociferous will to win, like, say, Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Magic Johnson.
Kareem, I know he won a lot, but I don't look at Kareem as like a cold-blooded Michael Jordan type guy.
No, but he was competitive. He was competitive in a very introverted way, and he was just so damn skilled. I mean, there's just no one who could cover him. So you could kind of get away with that. Wilt Chamberlain was kind of a flake, right? I mean, Wilt was in his own world, literally. Russell was, of all the centers, the guy who was a cold stone killer.
I think with Chamberlain, Sap, it was almost like everything was so easy. Like, he was so much bigger and stronger and faster than everybody else. It was like, I think it was hard to motivate him.
Well, in the comparison I make with LeBron and Wilt in some ways is, it almost feels like at times they didn't want to hurt someone out there. They're like the biggest, strongest, fastest guy on the court. They just physically dominate everybody. It's almost like they don't have that chip on their shoulder. Like, Wilt was famous in high school, famous in college. LeBron was famous in high school. So there's no chip on the shoulder. With Jordan, we hear about how he was cut from his 10th grade team, and,
a lot of urban legends
enemies all
Jordan.
over the place. Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows what's true, what's false? But there was no, sometimes you need to go through some episodes that are negative to become who you become. If it's just handed to you on a silver platter, or just if you're that much better than everybody else, you don't know how to fight through it. I mean, Tom Brady, I think, is a perfect example of that. 6th round pick. No one expected him to do much. He wasn't even highly recruited coming out of high school. Meanwhile, Peyton Manning was the most highly recruited quarterback in a decade, first pick in the draft.
Dad was
totally
in the
different
NFL,
matchup. It's two totally different things. Exactly. So sometimes you see that, but Wilt and LeBron both just were physically just better than everybody. And in LeBron's case, he's mentally smarter than everybody else. And that's why I think he's the greatest player ever. But yeah, no, I admire Westbrook. I do. I will watch him anytime he plays. Sometimes it's frustrating to watch. Another play.
Does he have the chance to elevate himself on that list of point guards? Then I guess that's the
He
question,
can,
because
sure.
you and I
Oh, yeah.
obviously aren't putting him at 2. And Scott Brooks is his coach, so take it with a grain
insane.
of salt.
Yeah, that's insane.
But so not necessarily how high can he go, but can he pass multiple guys in that point guard list? If, as his career progresses, maybe he wins a title, maybe he wins another scoring title, maybe he averages a triple-double for 3 more years. I mean, can he go a lot higher than he is right now, in your opinion, on your list of point guards?
Yeah, I mean, he could maybe surpass Jason Kidd. Chris Paul, if anything, is trending in the right direction, even though he's older than Russell Westbrook. I can't see him surpassing Isaiah Thomas, Steph Curry, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, or Magic Johnson. Yeah, he could surpass.
No, you're
Jason
talking about
Kidd.
titles there. You got to win titles to pass.
You got to win titles. Yeah, those guys, they're never going to catch Magic and Oscar and West and Steph Curry. I don't think, and even Isaiah Thomas.
Thomas won 2 championships. He's not gonna win 2 championships.
I mean, another point guard that I would put at least on the same plateau as Westbrook is someone that I know you loved as a player, Gary Payton. See, the thing with Gary Payton and Jason Kidd is the raw numbers aren't as impressive as Westbrook's. They were so much better on the defensive end. We're talking about 2 of the all-time great defenders in the history of the league.
No doubt.
So that's a big difference. So now that's like the tiebreaker. That's, again, where LeBron and Jordan separate themselves from Magic and Bird, because they were elite defenders. Magic and Bird were good team defenders. Totally different thing. So, no, he could certainly elevate. Absolutely. I mean, he can only add to his legacy. He's not winning a title in Washington. In 3 years, does he say, you know what, I'll sign a minimum contract to go play with whoever the best team is? That doesn't seem to be in his DNA either, though. I don't see him joining forces with anybody. He seems, although he did bring Paul George to OKC, but I don't really see him being that guy.
It kept him there. They traded for him, and then
they did, right?
He kept him there when he was there already. So no,
in 2 years, does he go join the Lakers to try to win a
No,
title with LeBron and Anthony Davis? That
I
doesn't
don't
seem
think
to be in
so.
his DNA. That's his hometown. And he may say, you know what, the hell with this. I need to win a title before this thing's over. I'll go join LeBron. But he looks at LeBron as a contemporary and as an enemy, if anything. So I don't think he has that makeup.
I don't think he's capable of taking like a real backseat. Like him
No.
and Beal are co-stars, and I think he's
Mhm.
fine with that. I don't think he has any problem with Beal launching as many shots as he wants to take, as
Right.
long as Westbrook gets to launch as many shots as he wants to take. But if it's like a LeBron and where he has to take a major backseat to him, I don't think
No.
that he's. I just don't think he has. It's not that he's opposed to like saying, man, this guy is great, but I'm better. I don't think he looks at it that way. I think he just like he's on the court and's like, I got to do everything I got to do right now. I can't let the game be in somebody else's hands. I need to figure this out for myself.
Jet, let me bring it to our business. You worked with Glenn Ordway. I'll throw Mike Francesa in there. These are titans of the industry, right? Could you ever see Mike Francesa or Glenn Ordway being the third guy on a radio show?
No.
I mean, they're not going to sit there,
and they wouldn't.
They're not going to do headlines every half hour and chime in occasionally with some funny stuff. They're the host, and Russell Westbrook is an alpha. At best, co-star with Bradley Beal. He had difficulty being a co-star with James Harden. Now, I don't think Harden's easy to play with, and that just didn't work out. They were best friends growing up. I don't know if they remain friends, but that didn't work out. No, it's not in Westbrook's DNA to go, you know what, I'll come off the bench and do what Carmelo Anthony's doing now, which is doing a nice job in Portland at an advanced age and getting you 15
Carmelo,
a game.
5 years to be okay with
Took
that.
him a while to get there, but Westbrook is so hyper athletic that I don't see him aging well necessarily, because if he starts to lose some of that athleticism, then the rebounds and the assists go down. He's never been a great shooter. Carmelo, is an elite shooter. Different type of player.
Carmelo is a specialist, right? Now he's a mid-range. He's a scorer. Not asking him to do anything else. And oftentimes those are the players that come off your bench. Russell Westbrook is never going to look at himself as, okay, this is my one job is to, shoot mid-range. No. I'm going to get every rebound and make every pass. And that, like you said, he's kind of like a tornado. So he's not like a prototypical 6-man or bench guy, because he does do a lot of things, but because he does a lot of things, he sometimes doesn't, do what is best for the team necessarily. Right.
Yeah. He wants to do everything.
Like if Carmelo was like, I'm going to launch, 20 shots and I'm going to try to make passes and try to grab every rebound, this wouldn't work. And what he's doing on the Blazers is perfect for him. Come in, play 15 to 20 minutes, shoot in the mid-range, get buckets, don't play defense. Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to the first few years I started watching basketball, which was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw Will Chamberlain, he was playing in the finals against the Knicks, and he was grabbing every rebound, he was blocking shots, but he was really not impactful on offense. And then I looked up his numbers and said, that guy averaged 50 points per game one year and, regularly would average 35, 37. He had changed his game, because he went to the Lakers. Jerry West was there. Before that, Elgin Baylor was there. And he did figure out, well, you know what? I'll rebound and I'll play defense. And actually one year he led the league in assists, which just shows you how damn talented the guy was. But he decided, okay, I don't have to score. We've got scorers here. Westbrook, his personality is not to do that. He's not going to come into an organization and do kind of what Chris Paul has done this year and say, okay, I'm comfortable getting 16 points per game, but I'm going to make Devin Booker better. I'm going to make DeAndre Ayton better. Right. Westbrook doesn't have that type of makeup.
No, he's not gonna come in and say, I'm gonna be the guy that's gonna make all these other guys better. He's like, I'm gonna make this team really good because I'm really good. Which is, that's some way some players are, and not everybody can be Chris Paul. And we had a legitimate debate about the two of those guys last week.
Yeah.
And
no, it's a good debate. Yeah.
No one's saying one style may not necessarily be better than the other.
No, I mean, if Russell Westbrook was in the radio industry, he would host overnight by himself. That's what he would do. He wouldn't even want to be in. He'd probably want to be prime time
by himself every show.
He probably could. Yeah, the guy is just, I believe, the greatest athlete at the point guard position. One of a handful of the greatest athletes I've ever seen play basketball. He could have been probably an NFL quarterback or a wide receiver or center fielder in baseball. I mean, he's like the perfect athlete because he's not overly big. He's 6'3", 200 pounds, which leads you to believe he could play like any sport. Like give him a tennis racket, he could probably figure it out and be damn good at it. Give him some golf clubs, I'm sure he'd be good at that too. But scaling back himself, which is something that athletes sometimes have to do, it's just not who he is.
Yeah. All right. Well, Russell Westbrook is, again, one of the most fascinating players in the NBA, and he's on a team that is on a mission to disrupt things, whether or not that play-in tournament has any actual impact on the playoffs. And I have my doubts. We'll have to see. But certainly he has played himself and played the Wizards into at least being interesting. And that's more than we thought was going to happen after the first couple weeks of the season where they were in the complete basement. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are, as always, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check us out on fullpresscoverage.com or wherever podcasts are found. You can also find us on YouTube on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JetStryer. If you go there, remember to subscribe and give a thumbs up and comment. And we appreciate your patronage as always. We'll be back tomorrow with a fresh new edition of the podcast, talking about some of the teams from New York. Is there a budding rivalry between the Nets and the Knicks? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll see you then. Take care, everybody.